So what we're going to do is take these lists of data here and find their standard deviation. Find out, on average, how far away each number is away from the mean. It's roughly what we're doing. So the formula looks scary, I'll give you that. But let's break it down so we're not so scared. What does this giant thing tell us to do?
Divide,
Square root.
or square root.
Square root. That's the very last thing we're going to do. At the very end, we think we're done, we're going to take a square root of something. So we'll ignore that for now. What is happening inside these parentheses?
It's maybe
What's that mean?
You're gonna subtract something from the sample.
Subtract
one of the
something.
values minus the sample mean.
Take one of the values minus the sample mean, he says. So for example, I would do 5 minus 8. That's one of my x values. Sorry, say that again?
Can you just pick like one and be done, or
Ah.
do it over and over again for each value?
Good. So his question was, can we just do one of them and be done? Or do we have to do it over and over again? See this sign right out here?
Addition.
That tells me to add them all up. So guess what I have to do? I have to do it for every single one of them.
No.
So I have to take 5 minus 8? No. See why we don't want to do it for the population? So I have to do 5 minus 8. Then I have to do 6 minus 8, and so forth, right? After I do that subtraction, what do I have to do?
Add them.
Ooh, before that,
Square
I have to square each of those. So I'll do 5 minus 8, square that answer. Then I'll not do that for all of them, then add all of those. And then after I add them all, don't worry, we're going to go through it a little bit at a time. After I add them all, I'm going to do what?
Work on the end.
divided by
Divided by n minus 1. In this case, what is n minus 1? N is 6, so 6 minus 1, I would be dividing by 5. And then after I do all that, I'm going to take a square root. Which is why I gave you that beautiful table in the middle of the page to organize all this. So here's what I want you to do. List all the x's here vertically. The actual numbers from this list. 5, 6, 6, 10, 10, and 11. I'm just filling in this table to organize the work that's necessary to find the standard deviation. Here's the really good news. I'm showing you how to do the standard deviation by hand. It won't kill us, only looks like it will. On an exam, in about 5 minutes, we'll show you how to do it with the calculator. It'll take 15 seconds at most. You can always use the calculator on the exam. I think it's really important for you to understand what a formula does and what your calculator is doing for you, as opposed to just jumping straight to the calculator. So we're going to go through it once, and I swear it won't kill us. So here I want to list x bar. Well, what is x bar for this list? 8. I'm just going to put 8 on every single one of these. X bar is 8 no matter where we are. Those are all my x bars. We already found that. Right? Now I'm just kind of following along with that formula. Now I have to take each x minus x bar. That's what's in here inside the parentheses. So for each one of these x's, I'm going to subtract x bar. So 5 minus 8,
Negative 3.
negative 3.
2, negative 2,
6 minus 8, negative 2. This one's the same.
2, 2, and 3.
And now it ends up being positive. We're doing all these subtractions. If we do it a little bit at a time, it won't kill us. Then I have to square each of those, which means multiply it by itself. Be careful what you tell your calculator. See these parentheses here?
Yeah.
It means multiply that number by itself. I recommend put it into your calculator with parentheses, because your calculator will give you a different answer for this than it does for this. Why?
Because the parentheses tell you.
Well, first off, which one is the one we mean?
You mean the bottom one.
We mean the bottom one. We actually mean negative 3 times negative 3. This one actually means, go ahead and square 3, and then make that answer negative.
Oh.
So what would this one turn out to be?
Positive 9.
Ooh, this one's positive 9.
Oh, negative 9.
But this one would be negative 9, because it means do the exponent first, which is 9, and then it'd be negative 9. So make sure you tell your calculator this. Nothing should come out negative here, because we're squaring the whole thing. So negative 3 times negative 3, that's 9. Square each of these. These are all a bunch of 4s. We're breaking down this formula. So far, I've taken each x minus the x bar and squared them. And Ariana's over here saying, now we need to add them all up. That's what this means. The capital sigma, add them all up. So down here is why I have the total down here. The total of all those, what'd you just say?
34.
34? Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
We agree with that? Okay, so we did all these, we added them all up. Now, what do I do next? Divide by 5. N minus 1 is 5. I need to take that 34 and divide it by 6 minus 1. So that's 34 divided by 5.
Yes, 6.8.
And we get 6.8. Okay, pause for a moment. Any questions on what I'm doing? Yes.
So would that be S equals 6.8 then?
There's one more step to go. One more step to go.
Just square root it.
We have to square root it. Is everyone okay what we've done so far? And then the last piece that Kirsty forgot, because it's such a long formula, as we started like yesterday, it feels like. The last thing is to take the square root of all of that we just did. So now it's going to be S equals the square root of 6.8, which is,
2.6.
well, give me a couple more digits and then we'll round it together.
2.607.
Something like that? Okay, it probably keeps going, but I just wanted a few digits. But remember, the round off rule is to round one more place than your original data. So if my original data is whole numbers, where am I going to round?
That's the one that's with this.
To the one decimal place over, which is the tenth. So my answer would be
2.6.
2.6. All of that work to find the standard deviation. So if I put it up here, 2.6. What'd you say, easy?
That makes sense.
Yeah. It's tedious, I'll give you that. Imagine if you had 50 numbers in your list, wouldn't that be fun? Which is why we don't want to do it for the whole population. Yes,
So
sir?
the 6 minus 1, that came from the range? Or?
That came from this part of the formula. The n is your sample size, so how many numbers are in your list. We have 6 in our list.
Okay.
It did not come from the range, it's a coincidence.
Oh, okay.
So it's just count how many numbers are here.
Oh, okay.
So if I did this room right now, there's roughly 40 of you in here, my n would have been 40, and I would do 40 minus 1, regardless of the range. Range is one way of measuring the spread of numbers. Standard deviation is another way of measuring the spread. Kind of like mean and median are describing what's typical. Other questions? So let's interpret this. This says that on average, most of these numbers in my list are around 2.5 away from the mean. Let me say that again. It's 2.6 really, but I just said 2.5 when I'm speaking. On average, most of the numbers in my list are about 2.5, 2.6, away from the mean. How far away from 8 is this? 3, so it's kind of like 2.6. How far away from 8 is this? 2. So this is 2 away, 2 away. A lot of them are 2, a lot of them are 3. So in between there, between 2 and 3, 2.6 kind of makes sense. It's not exactly an average, but that's what it's measuring. Do we expect this standard deviation here to be higher or lower?
I would say higher.
Why?
Well, actually, because I guess the numbers are farther reaching.
They're farther reaching. He's giving me hand signals too. Remember the standard deviation, the range, we're all talking about how spread out the numbers are.
Huge.
The range was bigger here, which means these numbers were more spread out than those. So the standard deviation here should be much bigger than that one. Now, I gave you another chart there to do it by hand. You can do it by hand for fun later when you have nothing else to do. But now I'm going to show you how to do it with a calculator. So, everyone should have their calculator handy. Make sure you have that out, you know how to turn it on. Some of you have never used these calculators before. I want to show you how to get started here. We're going to be doing this a lot.
That would be six.
So turn it on, see if you can locate the stat button. Stat, if not, I'm going to show it to you. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, do you have an ID? Yeah.
That's before that.
ID stat plot.
No, just stat. There's a button that says stat. It's roughly
You get
It's on the second row.
second row down in the middle. I'm going to show you where it is in a second.
Oh, I see it.
See it now? Did you see that name? We're going to find out. Are you would too? Some of you have 83, some
So
of you
like for
have
the first
84s.
one, negative.
Here's the stat button I was talking about. You want to find the stat button? If we got the calculator or not. Okay, on and stat. When I click on stat, it gives me something that looks like this. Are we all here?
Yep.
By the way, when I'm showing you calculator functions like this, make sure you stop and ask me along the way, because you need to go do this on your own. We want to edit the list of numbers, so the default already is edit up here. So I just need to come down here and hit enter.
To edit?
And after, it should already be on edit, then I hit enter at the very bottom. If you have one of my MATLAB calculators, you may already have numbers in here. Anybody already have numbers in their list?
Yeah.
Okay, if you have numbers in your list already, let me just put some there for a second. So if you happen to have some numbers here, what you want to do is use your arrow button to go up to the very top. Only if you have numbers there. Listen carefully. Do not delete the list. You want to clear the list. If you delete it, the whole list goes away and I'll have to put it back in, which I can do. People are like, I lost my list. Clear right here. Clear and enter. Yes. Anybody else need help clearing their list?
Nope.
If you have it clear, type in our numbers from our latest upload. So we should all be typing our numbers in here.
Do you put A for this too?
No, we don't put anything for list two. Do we have all those numbers typed in? By the way, these directions of what I'm talking about are at the bottom of the page that you got down. At the very bottom of page 28. Enter the data in L1 by pressing stat, edit, and enter. That's what we're doing right now. Directions at the bottom of the page. Everyone okay with how to get that far? Now we want our calculator to do all the rest of the work. We love our calculator. Please do the work for us. So what we're going to do now is go back into the same stat button we started with. Same stat button here. And now we want it to actually do some calculating for us. So we're going to move over to where it says calc. And it's over here, one column over, so I'm going to use my arrow buttons to move over to calc. Somewhere got there?
Just hit the side arrow.
Side arrow till you see, it'll say calc, and you just see this one bar stats. Help each other out, please, or ask me for help. We all there?
Yep.
Okay. One bar stats is exactly what we want. We have one variable, and we want the stats for this. That's what we're asking for. So I'm going to hit enter because I want one bar stats. And depending on your calculator, you may or may not have this screen. Some of you may have something that just looks like one bar stats just typed.
Yes, that's what I have.
Okay, so,
Well, I have a number one and then,
oh, the one that's
and
not
then a
the,
hyphen or whatever. or-
right, looks like this.
Yeah.
So some of you don't have that, that's okay. So for those of you who have this, everyone either should have just this on the screen or a screen like mine. Is that true?
Yeah.
After this, you're going to want to tell it which list you want, but I'm going to show you all how to find the list. We want list 1. I'm going to show you how to find that. The rest of us up here are going to tell our calculator we want list 1. I'm going to show you how to find the list because it's not totally obvious. It already says list 1. See above all the numbers, there's all these blue buttons. Yours might be yellow depending on your calculator. This says L1, L2 above the number buttons. You see those?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, we want list 1, which is
So
right above the
seconds.
number 1. Because it's blue, I'm going to hit blue and then enter.
These numbers?
Yes, sir?
Why don't you say L2? L1.
So tell it you want L1, the way I just showed you.
One, because that's.
So L1 is above this one here, and it's in blue, so we're gonna do second, and that number 1 should get you that L1 there.
And then you hit enter or?
One moment, you will, if you have this calculator, you can just hit enter.
Okay.
Everybody find the L1?
Yeah.
Leave the frequency list blank for now. Leave frequency list blank if you have this calculator, just ignore it. We're gonna come down here to calculate,
I know. There's all the answers.
and it should look like this. I wanna make sure everybody can get to this screen right here. If it didn't work, ask me or your neighbor to help you get there. You're gonna wanna know how to do this, because we're gonna do it over and over and over and over and over again. And then some more.
The range.
Everyone back here with me now? Everyone has these numbers?
Yep.
Let's go through them one at a time. Hey, what's that first one?
8.
X bar, which we calculated by hand earlier. No longer do we even have to do that. Yes.
I've got a question on my calculator. It's got a different thing on the bottom. Mine has an N equals, like a down arrow and then an N and then equals 6. Not a Q line.
The down arrow is going to be similar to what we have here. We're going to hold that thought.
Okay.
Hold the thought about the down arrow. But did we start with X bar equals 8?
Yes.
That's the sample mean. What does this mean right here? Sigma x equals 48. If you add up all the x's, you'll get 48. That's what happened when you were calculating the mean earlier. We don't really need this one much. What does this one mean?
That means it's just squares. The number above it squares.
Yeah, if you square all the x's and add them, we don't really need this one either. But look at this one. Sx equals 2.607 blah 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 blah.
Is that before we square root?
That's what it was after we square rooted it, before we rounded it. It's behind my screen right now. You guys remember the number right before we rounded it to 2.6? That's the exact same number your calculator showed you when you did the square root. So when you type your list into your calculator, it will find the mean for you, and it will find the standard deviation for you. You no longer have to do this formula, which was so fun. You even forgot how much fun it was just celebrating back then. And even the mean, you don't have to add them all up and then divide. I mean, imagine if you had 50 numbers. You could just type the 50 numbers into your calculator, say 1 bar stats, please. You don't even have to tell it please, and it'll do it. I like to be polite. Now let's talk about what else we have here. This sigma x right here. We are not going to use, I'm about to say ever, but there's one exception. We'll say ever with, the n was 6, that's from counting. The minimum was 5. And then there's a down arrow here, and your down arrow is a different spot, Kirsty, but if we use the down arrow, it'll give us more information. So push the down arrow till you see all this. So your down arrow is just slightly different than mine. Does everyone have this part down lower from the down arrow? Guess what min x is?
Minimum value.
Minimum value, which in our case was 5. These other ones we're going to talk about tomorrow, maybe later today. And max x
The maximum.
is the maximum, which we knew also. But imagine if you had so many numbers that you can't sift through them to find the minimum and the maximum. It's just going to hand you them. So if I had a really long list and I now wanted to find the range, how could I use this to find the range?
Doesn't it just say? Yeah,
The maximum minus the minimum, right? They're right in front of you. So the calculator's not going to give you the range. Sorry, it's not that good. But it gives you everything you need. You just have to do one subtraction problem and you can do the range. So no matter how many numbers are in there, what order you put them in, they don't even have to be in an order. You can just take the max minus the min to get the range. Are we good?
Yep.
Okay, so now, we all think we handled that? Now that we've done that, I want you to find the standard deviation for this list now. Go ahead and go back into list 1 and type over the old ones. And put the new numbers in there. See? I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Just go back into stat and edit.
Then you go to edit.
Stat, edit, and put the new list in there. We're not gonna do that one by hand because We're lazy. Some of us are.
Yeah, yeah, and then you just type in the second set of numbers.
Alright, what do we get?
The SS is
Okay, let's a little bit more focus before we take a break. Thank you for shushing for me. I don't like to shush people, but that's what we need right now. Pretend I'm shushing you. What number did we get for the standard deviation?
6.9.
6.9 we round? Can we agree to that?
Yes, 6.9.
Okay, right now, those of you who are shy and don't want to speak up, if you don't have 6.9 on your calculator, at the break you're going to ask me where that came from, and I'll show you on your calculator. But what we did is we typed this into list 1 and did 1 bar stats again, just like we did before. It should have also told you that the mean was still 8.
It's almost the same number, so it was kind of tricky.
Notice this standard deviation is higher than this standard deviation. Yes, Hannah.
I'm confused where you got that number.
Okay, we're going to type all these into list 1,
I did that,
do 1 bar stats. Did you have the negative?
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to check it when we take a break here in less than a minute and see what happened. Sounds like you're telling me the right thing. We'll find out. But let's just summarize this and we'll take a
Look
break.
at SS.
Why is this number larger than this one?
I don't know why.
15.
The standard deviation is higher. The variation is higher in the second list. So these two numbers are another way of measuring the variation. This says around every number is about 7 away from the mean here. The mean was 8. That's quite far away from 8. That's like 10 away from 8. This is 4 away from 8. Some are closer, some are further, but on average they're all around 7 away from 8. Questions on standard deviation, what it measures, how to find it. I'm going to find Hannah's problem here in a second. Yes.
So these numbers show us how far the numbers are from the average number.
From the mean, yes. So what's typical away from the mean? So you know how the mean is what's typical of the group. Like if I talked about the age in this room, 22.6 is the typical age, we're saying.
Right.
The standard deviation is what's typical to be the distance away from that. So if the standard deviation in here was 5, I'd say it's typical to be 5 above or below that 22.6 number. So does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back, we'll do another measure of variation, and then we'll go from there. And we're going to figure out what happened to yours. Okay, let's flip over to the top of page 29. Top of page 29, please. We are at the top of page 29. Here we go. All right, so we've already talked about range. Highest minus lowest, right? We talked about standard deviation, which is actually the most common way to measure variation. And then there's another one called the variance, which is the top of page 29. The variance is simply, I'm going to add it right next to this list here, but you have it on your next page. It's S squared. It literally is squaring the value for S. It's the number you had before you took the square root using the formula. Now listen carefully. I'm not going to square these numbers. Maybe I will, and then I'll tell you why I'm not. So we just did this problem, the 6.9 is one we did just before the break. Down here, can somebody type in 6.9 squared into their calculator, please?
47.61.
47.61? Do we agree with her? Please go back into your 1 bar stats and tell me what the S was before you rounded. What was S for this one before we rounded it off? I just trusted you guys and I wrote it on my calculator. 6.928, give me some more.
20323.
323?
Yep.
Quick, is that right?
Uh-huh.
So what I just had her do was go back into 1 bar stats and see what it said the standard deviation was before we rounded it. Square that one for me. Take you a little longer, I know.
48.
Exactly 48?
Oh, did you?
She says when she squares out when she gets 48. I want to make sure someone else agrees with her. Yeah? I see some nods. So if I was doing this problem on my stat lab, FYI, it's on your homework. It'll say, find the standard deviation, find the variance. This is the symbol for variance. Guess what happens if I type this one in? It's gonna be wrong. You don't ever want to square the number after you've already rounded it. So I know you rounded it and got 6.9. We're not gonna square that one. This is not the way to get the variance because we rounded it off. You wanna go back to the original number and square that one and now round it. So the answer was exactly 48 or 48.0 if you were going to one decimal place. So the standard deviation here is 48. Was there anything after decimal or just 0.0? Exactly 48? Everyone okay what I mean by the subtle difference there? Do not take your rounded standard deviation and square it. We'll put it in the store. So what are we going to do then to find the s squared for the first list?
We're gonna have to re-put in these values.
Yeah, we're going to put those numbers back in our calculator to see what it was before we rounded again. Unless somebody wrote it down. I think I only wrote down part of it. So we're going to need to put those ones back in to find out what the standard deviation was before we rounded it. Some of us are going to be quicker than others, so we're going to go back to stat and edit, type in that list, and then do one bar stats again. You want to get to the point where you can go through those steps pretty regularly because we're going to do it a lot.
2.60768096
Too fast. Wait. Slow down.
680,
680
962.
962. Okay, I got lost somewhere. I'm like, wait, I got lost. We agree with that one? Yes? When I square that, oh yes ma'am.
Where did you find that one?
Ah, I'm glad you asked. We typed this original list, the 5s up to 11, into our list 1 and did one bar stats again.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at the SX button, or the SX display, because that should be the standard deviation. You got a different number again?
Nope, I have that number. I don't know why. I was.
Okay, that's all right. We want to know where we find it. We're getting the SX off our calculator. It's hard because I don't know what you're looking at, right? And then when I square that, it turns out to be
6.8.
6.8, even.
Yep.
So my answer here is 6.8. What happens when you square the 2.6? Just check to see how wrong it would have been. 2.6 squared if we had
6.76.
6.76? In that case, if we had rounded, it would have rounded to 6.8. We might have gotten lucky and gotten the right answer. It depends on how close it is. Because there was a 0 here, there wasn't much difference from rounding and not rounding, so that would have worked. But in general, it won't always work. So I don't want this one. I want the whole thing squared. The good news is you can just do that part on your calculator. The squaring you can handle. So there are 3 ways of measuring variation. That's a 48. I thought it was a 4.8. Wait a minute. So we have the range. The range here was 6, the range was 20. The second number was larger, telling me they were more spread out. We have your standard deviation, 2.6 or 6.9. Again, the second one bigger tells me they're more spread out. 6.8 versus 48. Again, larger number, more spread out. 3 different ways to measure variation. The most common one that's used is standard deviation, but you will be asked for all 3 of them. Just like mean, median, mode, mid-range, we're asked to make sure you know what they are, and then we'll use different ones for different things. We all right with that?